for coming. I'd like to introduce our speaker for this presentation. This is Phil DeVoe. He's been working in Agile for 20 plus years and been doing Agile Transformations for at least the last 5. A lot of hard-won experience. So I'd just like to welcome him to the stage.
Good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Hopefully you can hear me in the cheap seats. There is space up front. Just a real quick note. There are some stickers on the tables and stuff. Feel free to take them. If you don't want them, that's cool. If you want them, cool. Either way. But I thought you guys might find them kind of entertaining.
Your microphone on.
It is not on yet. Hold on a second.
There's a little on switch on.
Yeah, I know. We're getting feedback, which is why I turned it off. Okay, try that. Yeah. Can you guys hear me now? Okay, better? Okay, perfect. All right, welcome to Overcoming Common Pitfalls in Your Agile Transformation. As they said, my name is Bill DeVoe, and I've been doing this, doing the Agile thing for about 20 years. Started off as a developer in the trenches doing this, moved into management, and pretty much every company I've been at, I've either introduced an Agile transformation or I've helped ones, most recently, been helping transformations underway move into the next phase of their lives. My focus in the last 5 years or so has been explicitly on enterprise transformation. So what does it mean to transform beyond just a team, taking a Scrum team or an extreme programming team? How do we move beyond that? And that's what this is. That's what this talk is kind of helping identify some of the things that I've run across in my experience with pitfalls that I've had and seen what we can do to overcome those. So who am I? I'm just going to talk about all that stuff. This is actually, I will let you know that I'm going to post this presentation on my website, so you guys are welcome to have it after I'm done with it. But this is kind of the idea. The intent here, though, is I've got a lot of alphabet soup at the end of my name. You can see I don't really put a lot of truck in that. What I do say is that I do have 25 years in IT, more than now, almost 30, and about 20 years of that doing Agile. So, real quick question, just a quick survey. How many people in here are Scrum Masters? Okay, most of you. What about product owners? Okay, few. Business owners, people who are responsible for the business side of things. Okay, great, some. Who's in management specifically? Okay, wow, quite a few. What about some other role? Is there some other role that I haven't mentioned? Just quick sampling.
Release train engineer.
RTE, okay. Agile coach, great. All right. Sorry, QA? Awesome. All right, so yeah, the idea here is that really what we're talking about is applicable to almost any role. The things that we're going to be talking about, and this is going to be at a very high level. I want to kind of point out, I'm not going to give you specifically, go do this one thing and that'll solve your problems. This is here are some things you should be thinking about when you're engaging with these other groups, okay? If you want specific information or some specific tools, I do have a couple of things that I recommend that are techniques or exercises that you can run that'll help with that stuff. But really just ping me and I can help provide some information for you. So when we talk about Agile, we tend to talk about just the Scrum team, right? And sometimes when we talk about scaling Agile, what we're really saying is, well, hey, look, we're going to have more Scrum teams, okay? There's a big question I've had most recently about when we're talking about scaling with my clients, it's like, well, are you talking about breadth or depth? And they kind of look at me a little bit weird, and I'm like, well, are you talking about, I want all of my teams to do the same thing? Or do I want to create teams of teams that are all focused on the same effort? And if you're just talking about everyone doing the same thing, that's sort of a breadth-wise transformation. If you're looking at using an Agile scaling framework like SAFe or DAD or Scrum at Scale or something like that, you're really looking at depth, which is organizing teams around efforts to produce a product. So your different approaches can actually have very different techniques for how you're going to do those things. But the thing is that all of this stuff is based in technology, typically. Very rarely are we seeing this come out of another group. Although recently I had a client who was in operations who was doing just this exact same thing. So, but typically we're in technology. But we're not the only people doing this, right? We have all these other groups that are part of the company that influence what we're doing in the technology space, right? We have management, operations, HR, and finance. They have a lot more impact on our Agile transformation than we might think they do. And so we want to try to talk about what that might look like. So you saw we were playing Pitfall before the presentation started. Pitfall's an Atari 2600 game, came out about 1981. It was actually one of the first games that actually had an ending for the Atari, which was kind of cool. But the hero, Pitfall Harry, has to overcome a whole bunch of obstacles, pitfalls, in order to achieve the prize. So some of the common pitfalls that he stumbles upon are things like, when we're talking about communication, for instance, oops, we got bit by the communication snake. Oops. Whoops, there's a scorpion, mindset scorpion. We got our expectations, kind of throwing us over. Culture, and sometimes I feel like I just want to do that. Just jump right in the alligator, right? The idea here is that there's some things that are going on with our transformations that are going to be really challenging for us. And so I've taken some of the obstacles, some of the pitfalls that Harry runs across, and I'm using those to sort of demonstrate the pitfalls that we're going to see with our groups. So what are those pitfalls? Well, expectations, communication, culture, mindset, and our processes and policies. All 5 of these things really can impact how our organization, how our company is going to be transforming into Agile. What is our goal? Well, our goal is the diamond ring, okay? Is to get sustainable Agile transformation. And our idea is let's be Pitfall Harry and get the ring at the end of this, all right? Okay, so unfortunately we can't see the top of the screen, which is kind of bizarre. But this is, we're talking about teams right now. So there's a bunch of things from team dynamics. So team pitfalls, both intra-team and inter-team. So we're talking about multiple teams having to talk together, or even just within the team itself. So what are some of the things we're talking about from a communication perspective? Well, things that we can do to help overcome some of these pitfalls around communication are having our clearly documented working agreements. All right, how many people have definitions of done right now? All right, what about definitions of ready? All right, fewer. What about team working agreements? Okay, what kinds of things do your working agreements have? What do your team working agreements document? Yeah?
Logistical things like what our working hours are, just for each other, and how we communicate when we're taking a day off or working from home. And then we also have like the squishy stuff, what I call the norms, how we behave with each other, things that set us off that don't, put certain comments in your PRs, all that.
It's fabulous. It's exactly what I'm hoping to see in those things. So, in case you couldn't hear, just things like, how do we work with each other? How do we tell each other when we're taking a day off or going to the doctor or going to be out of office? How do we work with each other? And how do we sort of avoid some of those potential areas where there could be quicksand within our team dynamic, right? Those are great things to have done. So having team working agreements can be really good. It helps sort of document and codify, not codify, but formalize your tribal knowledge. One of the challenges that we have when we have teams that churn a lot, when there's a lot of people coming in and out, is that a lot of tribal knowledge is lost when new people come in. So we want to have a way of helping document that. Our working agreements can really help with that. Your definition of ready can also really help with getting your team able to be successful when you actually go to execute in a sprint. So that's a good thing. Another thing we can do is having consistent meetings and ceremonies, all right? It's a specific cadence. Say, look, at Tuesday at 10 o'clock, we have a backlog refinement meeting. Great, so I know who's going to be there. We also know who these stakeholders are going to be and whether they should be and who needs to be present for that thing. And we can also, especially with our sprint review or demo, we can also make sure we're validating our product value with our customers, or as close to our customers as we can get. The idea being we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing the right way. Our beavers, right? You guys heard that term used for big visible information radiators? So we want to have ways that we can communicate out from the team to other people. Hey, look, here's what we're working on. Here's where we are in our sprint. Here's how much work we've delivered this sprint, how much we have left to deliver. All right, your beavers are going to have a lot of information that's going to be available, and it's publicly available. You can just put it up on a wall. This is the arts and crafts project that most Scrum Masters hate. But if you work for a company that has technology that's using like Jira or Rally or something like that, then you can actually just have a television screen set up with that dashboard up on that screen. And if you're using Chrome, there's actually an extension where it can cycle through different tabs. You can have multiple teams, their dashboards cycling through on that television. So if you have a common area with multiple teams in it, you can still have that kind of information to cycle through. The biggest thing though that I see is that a lot of companies are still working with distributed teams, and actually they're gonna be working with distributed teams. That's kind of the way of business in the 21st century. So we need to figure out what distributed team practices we want to hold on to and actually use those effectively. The big thing here is if one of your team members is remote, your entire team should act like they're remote. If you have a team meeting and you're not involving the other person, or you have it in a room with everybody who's there, but that one person's gonna be on the phone, that's a very different dynamic than if everyone's on the phone, or if everyone's on video conference. The biggest thing here is, as much as possible, try to find ways that you can use good distributed team practices and adhere to them when anyone is remote, let alone the whole team. All right, our culture is a huge thing that we have to deal with. So what can we do? Again, tribal knowledge, all right? That's a big thing we have to deal with. Distributed teams especially, we have to have discipline and rigor around that. So documenting our things with our working agreements, making sure that we're not indoctrinating, but bringing people together when they come into a team and helping them understand, here's how we operate, can be really helpful. Having our culture of shared and full ownership. What do you think I mean by that? Okay. So what I'm talking about here is actually of the code or of the product. So we don't want to have things like, that's Bob's code, or that's Frank's stuff, all right? We all want to have the ability to understand how everything is working. So the important thing is that we have a shared ownership of it. The team owns this, not an individual, okay? This is a very big mindset shift and culture shift, because a lot of people sort of look at this as job security. If I'm the only person who can do this, then they're not going to fire me, all right? The idea here is we want to have full ownership by the team. This is helping us create what we call those T-shaped skill sets. Are you guys familiar with that term? The idea is that you have depth of skill and depth of knowledge in particular areas, but that you have a breadth of knowledge across a lot of areas. So you may understand a little bit about Jenkins and a little bit about your release process and a little bit about this, but you have a depth of knowledge as a Java developer or as a quality tester, all right? Taking and looking at extreme programming. That's a lot of cultural stuff and best practices as part of XP. All right. When I first started doing Agile, that's all that was there was XP. So all the processes that we used were based upon extreme programming concepts. But the idea here is pair programming, right? Or collaborative programming. When we introduced the idea of XP at my company, we just said, yeah, okay, we're not going to do pair programming. That ain't going to fly. We're not going to tear down all the cubes, create a lab space, and then just get two people together and start coding. That's just not going to happen. So we said, okay, great, let's do collaborative programming instead. And what I mean by that is, I would write some code and then I would bring somebody in and I would walk them through it, all right? So two things happened there. Number one, I kind of got to check myself. Did I write this stuff right? Is the design correct? Is the architecture supported? All that stuff. And I just shared my knowledge with somebody else on my team. So now I've got help with that shared ownership. They are beginning to build that skill set. And I'm also having another set of eyes look at myself. It's sort of a built-in code review. It doesn't have to be all the time, but I would recommend it highly. Testing first, right? So designing for, let's build this to be tested, rather than let's build it and then test it. So what can we do to look at that? Well, you can begin your automation process to actually go through and begin writing unit tests and automation tests before you ever write code, which is sort of like the ultimate for test first. But even if you're just thinking about the philosophy of it is, how can I approach this with a testing mindset? That's what we're trying to get to. Behavior-driven development, another one of those really good practices that's going to help us do those things. Co-location, obviously, if you can, it's good. There's a lot of things that happen as part of being a co-located team that are not going to happen as part of a distributed team. But if you aren't, then at least have those strong distributed team practices. I've got some articles on my site. There's a whole bunch of speakers at different conferences that talk about this on a regular basis. I've talked about it. So there's a lot of good material out there for you guys to reference that can help you if you're struggling in that particular area. All right, processes and practices. All right, so our culture is actually ingrained in our processes. All right, one of the things that we have is that when we learn something, hey, look, we have this problem. What do? We create a policy that lets us not do that again, all right? A company I worked for had this very onerous release process. And the entire thing was we had to get as many people to sign off on this and approve it as possible, all the way up into vice presidents of the company. It was like, do you think that VP really understands the code that's going to production? They don't have any clue. Why are they signing off on it? Well, because somebody screwed up and put something into prod that wasn't supposed to be there, it broke, and so now we have to have another layer of approval before it can go. All right? The idea is that we want to try to find ways that we can recognize when we're doing this, what processes we have that are because we have made mistakes before, and then what we can do to sort of roll those back as much as possible. What I will say is that company did a huge effort on trying to roll that process back and make it as simple as possible. So really kudos for them. Testing automation for as much as possible and where possible, right? So your automation, once you start automating yesterday, right? The idea is you want to try doing it, it's going to be your biggest bang for your buck in the overall scheme of things. So it can really help with a lot of regression, with a lot of validation, and you can begin to actually run those tests in production and validate your software, even if you've deployed and you haven't released it yet. We'll talk about that in a second. Adopting our DevOps elements and process. So that's kind of where we're getting to, right? So continuous integration. How many people know if their teams are using code branches for their software and they merge everything back into trunk? Okay? How long does that process take? All right? Resolving merge conflicts. I've heard anywhere from like, a few hours to a few days, all right? Imagine if you're continuously integrating and you're putting all your stuff back together and you know immediately, did this check-in break the build? All right? If you can do that, then you can solve a lot of problems before they ever become problems. Right? Streamlining your release process. A lot of times your release process or deployment process is, again, very onerous. It's very difficult, very time-consuming. So what can we do to streamline that? Take a look at it. Be holistic. Don't just look at what we in technology can do. Look at the whole process. Who has to be involved? What steps are involved? Map your value stream, your pipeline from start to finish of how do we move code into production, and then see what we can do. Where are the delays? Why are those delays there? A lot of places, you want to get a firewall, it's 2 weeks. Why? Because it's 2 weeks. There's no real rationale for it. It's just, it takes 2 weeks. So what can we do to streamline that process? Right. This concept of release versus deploy. SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, has been really big about this. They're trying to move into a mindset of deploy as often as possible. So you look at the CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline. You're trying to put code into prod as often as possible, all right? Ideally with every check-in. But you have to have, number one, the automation to support that, and number two, recognize that deployment to production does not mean to release to customer. So you want to have things like feature toggles, like A/B testing, the ability to have maybe a mirror environment. You're having a swapping and A/B production environments where you can put stuff into production, but it's it's inactive production, and you can test it there before you actually release it to customers. But getting into that kind of a mindset with your teams can help with your processes and policies. All right. So if you can do these things, then you can avoid all the culture rolling over you and squishing you. You can get over the snake and those communications failures biting you in the butt, and you can begin to navigate the treacherous waters that are our process and policies. All right? All right. This is finance. Again, you can't see the top of it, but it says finance. All right. The biggest thing for finance is our processes and policies. Very typically, this is where a lot of our stuff comes in. Why is that? Because they're the ones that are telling us how much money we have to spend on things. Problem is, many years ago, we decided we should go to this thing called project cost accounting because it's really easy for us to do. We allocate money to a project, and then we do the project, and then that's it. Problem is, for Agile, it doesn't work very well, right? Because we're moving people to work instead of work to people. We want to create long-lived teams. Well, how do we do that? Not by creating projects that we move people to. So we want to move away from project funding and move to cost center accounting. When I worked at HP in the 90s, this is all they did. We had an R&D group, they got X number of $1 million a year, and that funded 100-something developers for the year. And that was it. And whatever we worked on was the most important stuff that we worked on, okay? Anything else that we had to get, like machines or tooling or any of that stuff, that was all part of the effort that we were doing, and that was funded separately. but the actual organization was funded every year at a certain amount with opportunities for advancement and bonuses and promotion. We want to fund organizations and teams, all right? This is going to give us those long and sustainable team dynamics, help us get to high-performing teams. All right? One of the goals that I've had as a coach is when I began doing Agile, I worked on a high-performing team. My very first team was high-performing, and that is incredibly rare. And my whole thing was, I had a thank God it's Monday kind of mindset. Because I wanted to go into work on Monday and work on cool stuff with cool people, all right? I'm trying to help every group that I work with achieve that same level of awesomeness, okay? So if we can do that, if you can create high-performing teams, you are gonna see more employee engagement, happier employees, more productive employees who want to be there and want to be contributing, all right? But we can only do that if we're not swapping them out and we're not changing things around all the time. The other thing we can do is introduce what we call innovation options. There's a thing in SAFE called innovation accounting. This is not that. That is separate, similar, but different. This actually, and I've had some success with this with some organizations, is an idea where instead of funding everything at the beginning, if you can't really move your finance organization to cost center accounting right off the bat, so let's say, great, let's do innovation options. Well, what are those? Well, you get to act like a stockbroker. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Tell me more. And the idea is that what we say is, okay, you asked for $5 million for your project. Great, I'm going to give you $250,000. And we're going to get together in a month. And we're going to establish some success criteria. How well have you spent my $250,000? And if you have succeeded, then we'll give you more money. If you have failed, we may look at cutting funding off. This actually is sort of pivot or persevere from lean startup in a financial sense. This gives us an opportunity for us to look at, from a financial perspective, how are we doing? Are we making progress against this project? Instead of just simply giving someone $5 million and saying at the end of it, well, where did it all go? I don't know. We spent it, we need more, we're not done yet, all right? We have an opportunity to say, well, okay, but we had these 4 meetings in a row where everything was successful and all of a sudden jumped off a cliff. What happened with that? This gives us an opportunity to meet regularly and evaluate how is our project doing? How are we actually developing this product, and are we meeting our success criteria along the way as we continue to fund these things? And so we can decide the return on the investment is now no longer going to be a benefit to the company, so we're going to stop funding the project. And we've only invested a portion of what we originally thought we were going to allocate for it. And all that money can then go to some other project that's being more successful. But the idea is it kind of helps, again, the finance folks feel like they're stockbrokers and they get to kind of manipulate money a little bit better. And it helps them get involved in the process, which right now they really aren't. All right? So again, if we can do that, then we can navigate those tricky seas. Okay, HR. There's a couple things with HR, and this, again, you kind of look at it and you go, wow, why is HR involved? Well, because the culture, the mindset, the policies that HR has can be very orthogonal or contradictory to what we're trying to do with Agile. All right, so our culture, career advancement. How many people work for companies that value promoting from within? All right. How many people know managers who should not have been promoted? All right. Just because someone is at the top of their career path does not mean our next step should be making them a manager. All right. They may not be well suited to being a manager, especially in the 21st century, because management's job in the 21st century is not what it was in the 20th century or the 19th. So we want to try to find a way to break the mindset and the culture of advancement is the only way to measure progress, okay? So we do not want to only promote people who are at the top of their game. In fact, I read one book that said, if you promote your top performer to being a manager, congratulations, you just destroyed 2 jobs in one fell swoop. So we want to find ways that we can make sure that we're doing the right things for employees. Well, what does that mean? Well, our camp opportunities. So Dan Pig talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I think there's actually a 4th one, which is the community piece, the working with the people, understanding, relating to the people that are around us. It's somewhat related to purpose, but not as Dan describes it. So that's why I've added it as a 4th item here. So I think community has a huge piece, but autonomy, mastery, and purpose are absolutely things that we should look at for how can we help people get more opportunities to do things on their own, to lead small investigative groups, to get really good at something and become a subject matter expert on things. We want to find ways that we can do that, and that's where we need to have HR engaged in that process. All right? Our reward structures. All right? If we're just simply throwing money at people, we're not solving our problems. We need to find other ways to reward people. There's a merit money, which is something that Management 3.0 came up with, or at least is implemented very effectively. There's a lot of other ways that we can reward people, but generally speaking, peer-to-peer is very successful in that respect. Also, focusing on teams and not just on individuals is also another way of really helping bolster that sense of community, that sense of awe that teams get for feeling like they're part of something. So we want to try to find ways that we can do that. Employee engagement. All right, we talk about you can be a motivated employee and a disengaged employee. We want engaged employees. So what can we do? There's a lot of things around employee engagement that are going to help us get employees that are going to get to that thank God it's Monday kind of mindset. So we need to find ways to work with HR to get them to consider how do we engage our employees. Typically speaking, and Management 3.0 talks about this, those sort of out-of-the-box employee engagement programs that you find are not the way to go. You want to find something that's going to work for your organization. Local context matters. You guys are special, and your culture is different, your structure is different. You want to find a way that you can work within that, right? Mindsets. One of the things that I read, which is kind of funny, is there's an article, I think it was from Accenture. They talked about HR's job is to minimize variability in systems, whereas the Agile's job is to maximize variability. So we've got two competing thought processes going on here, two distinct mindsets. We want to try to find a way to go from job families and, here's your career pattern, your career ladder, and you can go up these things, etc. We want to find ways that we can find other ways that we can have people grow and expand within the company that don't just follow as typical, stepwise. Here's, I go from engineer 1 to engineer 2, then to senior engineer, then to, whatever, right? We want to find ways that we can help them customize what their career path looks like. The game industry is somewhat good and bad about this. Job titles in the game industry, I'm chief kitten herder. All right, what does that mean? It means I have a whole bunch of people that I talk to and make sure they're all working on the same thing. Oh, so you're like a manager? Well, not really. Well, you're like a project manager? Well, not really. I'm a chief kitten herder, that's my job, all right? Now, how does that relate to other job titles? I don't know. All right, with other companies? I don't know. That's one of the problems the game industry is struggling with right now. They're so creative about their job titles, they have no idea what those jobs actually are. You have to kind of put together a whole list of, here's my responsibilities. How does this map into your organization? But the idea is we want to try to find ways that we can do that within our companies with the people we have today. So that, again, that's going to be something that's going to require a mindset shift on the HR side. Right? So we're talking about increasing also our flexibility of our options. Maybe vacation time, that's not, right now, well, if you work here for 5 years, you get 3 weeks of vacation. And if you put in another 7 years, you'll get 4. Okay, no, maybe someone says, you know what, I would rather do vacation than get more money. All right, great. Or I'd like to do remote work and not be worried about getting promoted, okay? We want to allow for people to have some flexibility here and a sort of a self-directed control of their own destinies here, all right? Moving from extrinsic to intrinsic rewards. Again, those camp opportunities, stop throwing money at people, stop trying to promote people, find out what really is going to help them be successful. And we'll talk about some specific tools that you can use to help do that as managers and that you can communicate to your managers. All right. Processes and policies, okay? We want to replace our annual review process. How many folks have an annual review process? How many folks hate their annual review process? Okay. This is one of those windmills that I tilt at, and I really don't like the annual review process. It is onerous. It's very one-dimensional and very top-down. It's, I will tell you as your manager, here's how I think you did this year. Really? Do I have any say in this? No, you don't. Okay. We want to replace that with something that's going to be a lot more flexible, a lot more fluid, and allow the employees to feel like they have a lot more control. Adobe has done this. They've gotten rid of their review process completely, and they replaced it with what they call with check-in. If you go to adobe.com/checkin.html, then they have a whole thing about how they've publicized. Here's what we've done. But the idea really is focusing on delivering things on having communications and conversations between management and employees more regularly and on shorter timescales. So the idea is like we're going to meet once a week and we're going to talk about what are your plans for this week, what are your plans for this month, all right? What are your goals, how can I help you achieve them? That's what we're talking about, all right? Hiring practices. This is kind of a weird one, but the power dynamic within companies typically is employer has all the power, employee is lucky to be working there. And we want to be looking at how to change that, all right? If we can equalize that, we're going to have a lot happier employees, a lot more engaged employees. I just gave a Management 3.0 workshop to a company in Florida, and they're incredibly progressive. I mean, I was surprised. I was the 4th Management 3.0 workshop that they had in that company in the last 6 months. I mean, that was ridiculous. I can't get a company here to do 1. They've done 4. And, I was talking with their Agile coaches, and they're talking about how they've been making all these changes, and there's all this structure. I'm like, wow, this is a quasi-governmental group. I mean, they're working with the state of Florida as an insurance company as sort of a last resort, right? So like flood insurance kind of stuff. And we were talking to them, and they're like, I was like, so how is you guys, when you're advertising, do you advertise your salary ranges? They're like, well, no. It's like, well, why is that? Well, because you want to get the best talent for the cheapest price. And I'm like, yeah. And who has the balance in that power relationship? Well, it's the employer completely, right? But they're looking at changing that. Their head of HR was in that class, and as I was talking about, we need to look at how this whole employer-employee relationship is working and changing that. She's like nodding her head, and I think that they're on the right track. It's kind of amazing to me. All right, team-based goals. So if we have to do things around setting goals other than like professional growth or personal growth kind of stuff, we should be looking at team-based. How can I make sure that my people are trying to recognize the value they deliver to their teams, not just the value they're delivering for themselves, all right? It's a great example, Lisa Atkins' book. She talks about 3 developers who were supposed to, who are like all fighting amongst each other. They're all senior developers. And she's like, what the hell's going on with you guys? She talks to the manager, and she said, oh yeah, well, the manager said, well, yeah, because I gave them the requirement that I wanted them for a goal this year to take ownership of something. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, they're each trying to take ownership of a different thing, but the same thing, but in different ways. I mean, you're blowing my team dynamic here. So we want to try to focus on team goals as much as we can. All right. The last thing is 360-degree feedback. All right. Several companies I've worked at had the feedback process has been from manager to employee, and that was it. And if you wanted to dispute something like, I really think this was unfair because like my boss was gone for a year and has no idea what I did. The approval process, well, okay, great, write something up and then we'll send it to your manager and they'll approve it, attach it to your review. What? No, I'm criticizing my manager. You think they're going to approve that? No. Never mind. So we want to try to find a way that we can get feedback from everybody, from people underneath, from people above, and from people around. So what can we do to get that feedback, solicit that feedback, and use that to be really proactive about helping identify areas for growth, but also recognizing areas where people have been successful. All right. All right. This is a great dynamic. It's a great diagram from the future of work, talking about the evolution of the employee. All right. We're talking about from past stuff like working 9 to 5 to work anytime, working in an office to working anywhere. All right. Hoarding information to sharing information. Relying on email to collaborative technologies. All right. The biggest thing, I keep talking to people and I'm like, what should you guys do? Like, if you're trying to talk to somebody, what did you do? Well, I sent them an email. It's like, you're killing me, Smalls. Stop. Go talk to them. It's like right down the hall, right? Yes, go talk to them. All right. Oh, well, they're in a different building. All right, great. IM them. Or video conferencing, or call them, reach out, be proactive about this. Email should be your communication technology of last resort. All right, so at least the most passive thing you can do, the least active. All right. All right, so if we can do this, we can do all these things. All right, expectations. This is management, expectations, communications, and mindset. All right. So what do we have? What are management's expectations, and what do we have to do to help avoid those pitfalls? Well, The biggest thing here is, again, that their job is not what they thought it was going to be, all right? For a lot of companies, when you get promoted from within, you were the best individual contributor that you could have been. And you got rewarded by being promoted. And unless you are changing your mindset from individual contributor to manager, you are going to continue to act in an individual contributor kind of way. When I got promoted at Hewlett-Packard, my first 6 months on the job were hellish. I thought if I wasn't producing a PowerPoint in a conference or in a conference call or in a meeting, I wasn't being productive. I felt like I was sitting around and just talking to people, and I wasn't really getting anything done, right? Thankfully, HP recognized that, I might not have been a good manager. In fact, they said to me, you may have been a good engineer, but you probably suck as a manager. So thankfully for you, we have a 6-month curriculum where we're going to teach you how to be a manager in the HP way. Okay? By the end of that 6 months, I finally had the realization, this is what my job is. And it's to help my team succeed. It's not to do the work, it's to help the team be successful, okay? So that's the biggest thing, is that their job is different, especially in the 21st century, especially with knowledge workers. If you've not been developing software for 6 months, your skills are stale, okay? You do not know what you're talking about. So stop trying to solve their problems. Let them solve their problems. They know the problem space better. But this is a huge thing we have to sort of get over. Their expectation is their job is the same, and it's not. Okay? The work is going to come from the business, not from management, right? You don't want to go to the manager and say, I have this project, and then the manager gets the team and says, here's what we're going to work on, right? No, we're changing that whole dynamic. It's coming directly from the business, to the product owner, to the teams, all right? That whole dynamic is shifting, and that's what we have to make sure that they're aware of this, right? Direct reports could be on different teams, all right? Your employees could be matrixed across the entire company, and so no team member is working on the same team. That can be really weird, and as a manager, you have to recognize what's going on there, and how can I support that, okay? Again, you can't direct the work because they're all on different teams. You have to help the people that are working for you. Want to resolve possible churn of distributed teams. So one of the circles I have here was vendor management, okay? A lot of vendors, like TCS or Cognizant or something like that, you hear about the churn, like they have somebody work in a team for a few months, and then because that person learned those skills and excelled, they move them off of your project to somewhere else where they can charge more for that person. And they put somebody else in, okay? That creates a lot of churn. Well, what can we do to fix that? Well, we can change our SLAs with our vendors. Management's job is going to be to help solve that problem, okay? All right, mindsets. We want to be flexible to change. Change is everything. We have to embrace change, right? That's the core piece of extreme programming, and that's what we're going to have to do for Agile. So we're going to be flexible. We're going to try to help them understand it's okay that things are not the same way they were. If they're going to change, we have to change with the times. Right? We want to support that knowledge worker autonomy. Again, they don't have the skills anymore. They don't have the coding chops. Get out of the weeds. Focus instead on the other things that we need you to focus on, because management is too important to leave to the managers, but managers have a huge part to play in that. So what do we want them to be? People gardeners, okay? We want them to grow their people, all right? Care and feeding of your employees. That doesn't sound too bad, does it? That'd be great if we can move more managers to being people gardeners. Help them grow, help them find ways that they can expand their skills, expand their roles, all right? We want them to manage the system, not the people in it, okay? This is an important one. That they are the ones who are able to make the changes to the system and how it operates. To the policies and processes that we've stumbled upon, all those pitfalls, they're the ones that can help us with those. Their job is to remove impediments. Great, this is an impediment. Let's help us do this, okay? Finally, communication. Understand how the teams are providing information. I work in a lot of groups where it's like, I hear that, we have to do a one-page or quad chart for our VPs. Why? Because they asked for it. What business decisions are they going to make based upon this quad chart? I don't know. Well, why are you doing it? What value add is there? It keeps Bob from calling me, and okay. We want to tell you, look, we publish this information. It's available on our beavers. okay? It's available in our release notes. It's available as things that we're doing. There's a way for you to find out what's going on. But we have to help them understand how that information is being presented now. It's different than what they're used to. So rather than simply doing the same thing we used to do, let's find out what we can do and then how we can help them understand what we're producing. A great technique for helping managers and employees is delegation poker. It is actually for Management 3.0, and it helps establish sort of the guardrails for employees. So what you do is you kind of go through and you decide, here are the different areas you're going to be talking about. Taking time off, spending petty cash, or small expense report kind of stuff. Job assignments, that kind of stuff. And you kind of go through and you talk about, like, where do you see yourselves on the manager's going to tell you what you're going to do versus the employee told you what they did, scale, and everything in between. And you have the conversation. You play this sort of poker. It's like planning poker. Everybody picks a card and puts it up, and you go, oh, I think that we should agree on this thing. And it's like, I think I should tell you what you're going to do. Okay, we have some conversations to have. But the idea being, and I've got a sample deck up here, but the idea being is that it helps us really, again, lay those clear ground rules for how our employees are going to work, all right? And it gives them autonomy as much as possible. The idea, and what I challenged my M3O group was, if you find yourself wanting to pull back and keep control of things, ask yourself, what am I afraid of happening that's keeping me from going further down? What is it that is going to keep me from going one more or two more closer to employee autonomy? Okay? The second one is to be moving motivators. This is a great tool for understanding how your employees are motivated. Not everybody is motivated by money. Okay? So we want to find a way, well, maybe somebody cares about status, maybe somebody cares about ability to control their own work life. Maybe they have really interesting ideas about how they want to get mastery in something, right? This gives us, there's a whole set, it's based upon the CHAMP frogs mnemonic, the acronym. But the idea is that there's 10 different areas where we take a look at this, and then we figure out sort of what matters. And then we can also look at, based upon your motivators, where do you feel that you are being empowered or disempowered based upon your current set? Okay, based upon your current work, based upon your assignments, based upon your team, that kind of stuff. And we can begin to figure out, maybe this is not a good team for this person, maybe this is not a good assignment for this person. But this can really help managers understand, how are we motivating our employees? How are our employees motivated, and how can we help link in with that and support those? Okay? All right. So the most dangerous phrase in business, or this period, is we've always done it that way. All right. You guys know who Grace Hopper is? All right. You guys should. It's one of those things I think that more of us should know who she is. She was actually in the Navy, and she worked on some of the first computers. She actually found the first bug, which was actually a bug. Like it was a moth in the computer. It died. It fried out one of the vacuum tubes. She has it taped into one of her notebooks. But she actually created the idea of, let's have an English language programming language. People scoffed. You've got to be kidding me. That's so much extra work. Right now, you just put some symbols in and it works, right? Yeah, okay, and yeah, like 4 people on the planet can do this. What if everybody could do this? So she helped create COBOL, which is still the largest, it's still the most deployed programming language in the world. Right? Java's catching up really quick, but COBOL still runs like 90% of financial businesses, transactions. So, all right. So, if we can do all these things, if we can avoid all these pitfalls, we can get the ring and get that sustainable agile transformation. All right. Some quick resources for you guys. Obviously, Dan Pink's Drive, Management 3.0 book from Jürgen Apollo is fabulous. Future of Work is another book that has some really good resources for you guys around this stuff. And it has that picture that I showed you about the evolution of the worker, the Adobe check-in model, and then Harvard Business Review did a How Netflix Reinvented HR article that was really pretty good about specifically human resources and how we can do those things. All right? Any questions? Oh, I'll go back so you can get a picture. But again, I'm going to post this up on my website. So if you just go to artemisagile.com, then this will be up there. I'll do a blog post and have this up there. So, all right. So it's funny because actually I use this analogy a lot. I talk about when we introduce Agile into a company or into an organization, a lot of times it's sort of like introducing, it's sort of like you have this freshwater pond that's got all these freshwater fish in it. And they're all happy doing little fish, freshwater fish stuff. And some saltwater starts to come in and change the composition of it, right? And some fish like the new, some fish really don't like the new. And as more comes in, more Agile or more saltwater, then you begin to see that transition happen. And you begin to actually see some people who are beginning to give off toxins and talk about how bad this is and really pollute the pond in a way. There's nothing wrong with those fish. There's nothing wrong with those people either. They're not evil, they're not bad people. This is just not the right environment for them. So sometimes it's best to find them the right environment. Sometimes, again, when we talk about culture and mindset, it's like, this is the way we're gonna go. So what can we do to help you get on board with this? What kinds of challenges, what are you afraid of? You know, when I had one engineer who was, you know, like, I don't really care, just give me the requirements. I'm gonna go away for 6 months, and I'm gonna come back with a product. I'm like, that's not how this happens. We went a lot, you're not going to the cave, all right? You can't go into the cave for 6 months and come back and say, ta-da, here you go, product. We need to be guiding the product. The product is going to be evolving over time. We're trying to maximize the value we're delivering to our customer, which means our customer is going to be influencing how we're building this product. And then you can't do that from inside a cave. So what are you afraid of? What's the fear element here? Because that's usually what's driving a lot of that resistance. So when we're talking about that, you want to try to be asking powerful questions, and I really point you to Lenny Noyle's stuff for that. But there's a lot of things that we can ask and ways that we can ask questions that can sort of say, how did that make you feel? Or what was it about that was concerning? Or those kind of things, so we can kind of find out like sort of what's really going on behind the scenes here, rather than just, I don't like this and I'm gonna throw up my arms. Some people, if you end up in a situation like that, it may be like, hey look, let's just try to find you a better place for you inside the company. This may not be the right spot for you, and that's okay. We're not saying you're bad, we're not saying you're stupid, we're not saying that you're an evil person, hardly. We think that you're great. You were great, you were here for a while, and now we're going a different direction, and sometimes that direction doesn't include people who think like you do. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, sir.
Have you worked with organizations that have change management or community? And if so, how was your interaction?
Typically it's pretty good because a lot of the things that we're doing are also based in the change management stuff, like Cotter's 8 steps and that kind of thing. So we talk about, so the question was, if I've worked with companies that have like a change management group and then how that interaction worked. Again, typically it's, you know, because we're not really stepping on their toes, we're working with them. And if it's already in place, great, what are you guys doing and how can we leverage it, all right? We want to get small victories and then build upon those, the same way that Cotter does. And so, like I said, a lot of the time, it's actually working with those groups and augmenting what they're doing. Or they may not even know a lot of the stuff is happening. So if they're looking at, you know, like, oh, there's that Agile thing. Like a lot of people, when people think about Agile, they think, oh, we're just gonna, you have this giant crank for this machinery, and you just turn the crank and out comes software. And Agile is a new handle for the crank. It's a really pretty handle. It's got mother of pearl, and it's gorgeous, but it's just a different crank, right? And then they come back in 6 months, and it's like this push button monstrosity. We're like, what the? It's not what I asked for. Well, yeah, but that's how this works. That's odd. I don't know what happened there. That's really weird. Okay, well, all right. So like I said, the idea is that when we're talking about these changes, a lot of times people don't understand the scope of the change. And so when we begin to discuss, hey, look, we're talking about having to have conversations with HR and finance and vendor management and operations, and they're like, whoa, hold on, I did not think that's what this was. This is a new way of turning the crank, or a new handle for the crank. This is a whole different thing. So a lot of it is simply having people have awareness of it. And so again, with those groups, typically when I work with them, it's hey, look, I know that you guys are doing this. I'd like to understand what you're doing and how I can link in with that. And then here's what I would like for us to be working on from our side, and how can we make those two harmonize. So typically it's really good relationships. Yes, sir.
Back to the pond analogy.
Yeah.
It may not be a matter of so much fear as much as a matter of priority, where the fish may have to live
That's a really good question, but I think you have the answer in the question, which is you should have a dedicated Agile team. So, I mean, our goal is to have 100% dedicated teams, right? If you have somebody who's working on multiple projects, so first of all, as a former project manager, I can tell you that if I had someone who was split between two different projects, the other project was always a higher priority than my project, okay? So, we want to try to find ways that we can get it so that everybody is really focused on the work that we're trying to do, the product we're trying to deliver today, all right? So, we may need to recognize, hey, look, we're trying to do too much. We need to refocus our efforts. What really is critical to the business and what really is just not as critical? And it could be that it's still important. That's great. But we want to focus on getting this thing done first. And again, if we're taking a look at things through the pivot or persevere lens of every time that we're doing a release, we're trying to say, should we keep working on this or should we stop and go do work on something else? If we're being a little bit more just cutthroat about evaluating whether something really still has value to work on, then we're going to end up with fewer reasons why we would not have, why we could have our split personnel and staffing. So the idea, if we can focus on one thing, and I mean, there's things like, running the Scrum Penny game or something like that, where you can very easily show single threading one thing through the system is going to be a lot faster than trying to do multiple things at the same time, smaller batch sizes, that kind of thing. So there's some things from Lean that we can absolutely leverage for that. All right. Yes, ma'am.
So the topic being transformation, right? So we're moving from oftentimes waterfall-ish types environments to an agile environment. And a lot of times you have people that are fully on board, right? So in the saltwater pond, they really want to be saltwater fish, but there's this huge knowledge gap. So if you take a project manager and say, congratulations, you're now a product manager, they don't know what that is. What are the successful ways that you've seen kind of making that transition from this is what your job was, but now your job is something completely different, and really nobody here is qualified to just switch jobs. That's not what they do.
Right.
So how do you find, to even begin making that transition? How have you seen that work?
Yeah. I hope you guys all heard that. It's a great question of how do we transition from an existing structure to a new structure when the people who are doing current jobs are now being asked to do something they have absolutely zero experience doing or understanding doing. A lot of it, I think, comes to you have to figure out who you're going to be leveraging. So it may require bringing people in from outside who are successful doing that. Either bring in product managers or product owners from somewhere else, or bring in subject matter experts and find ways to get them either the education or the coaching that they're going to need. I find that coaching obviously is a huge element that can really work to help bolster that. But I think the biggest thing is having the conversations that, look, here's where we're going, and we'd like to find out, if you go back to what I was talking about with management, of moving motivators, do you want to be a product manager, or would you rather do something different? Okay? So maybe that person, we don't just want to simply say, congratulations, you're a product manager. We might want to say, congratulations, your job is changing because we don't really need PMs anymore. What can we do to find a great place for you in this new structure? And so finding out how that's going to work. Now, you may have to have some roles filled out, at which point, okay, great, then we may have to do double duty for a while. That happens. Maybe you got, to your point, a foot in both ponds, salt water and fresh water for a while. But the idea is, how can we quickly get those people to be proficient? And a lot of that is going to be relying on coaches, relying on external people who have that experience, or internal people who have that experience, and then also getting people the education to get them up to where they can do that. All right. I suspect that we're out of time, but.
Awesome. So I just wanted to thank Bill. Let's give him a big round of applause. So next up is lunch. I'd like to encourage folks to rate this session, and all the sessions are in. You can either do it through the app, or there are barcodes, QR codes you can scan outside the door to rate the session, and feedback's really appreciated. So awesome.
Thank you guys, appreciate it. I'll be up here for a bit, and I'll be roaming around, so if you guys have more questions, then please come up. Absolutely. Happy to have been here.